everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective, where we're going to be taking a look at adaptations based off of Roald Dahl's books and shorts. I am Patricia.
And I am Arun.
And today we are actually going to be going a little bit out of order, but I feel that this is very appropriate because Arun came up with this really interesting idea about doing a versus series on two of these adaptations.
Yeah. So, for me, I always grew up. One of my favorite books I grew up with Roald Dahl is obviously the BFG, and so there's actually two movies that actually exist for this book at the moment. There was the one movie that everyone knows was directed by Steven Spielberg, and is the kind of like the CGI live action BFG, but there's actually a little unknown one which people don't actually really talk about, which I think is a bit of a shame, really, because in 1989 there was a animation company called Cosgrove Hall. We all know for Danger Mouse and also Count Dracula and various other British properties. And would you believe they actually did a theatrical animated movie for the BFG, and it was released in limited quantity, and then obviously it's become a cult classic on VHS and DVD. And so one thing we're going to do is compare the two and see which we think is better. So,
all right then. So here we go.
A Whiz popper! It's a sign of happiness! It is jollifying music! When you mix a bottle of fabulous rum-scuttle bubbles and giggles, it's part of the plan. It's yummy and tummy and tickles your tummy, and soon you's off with a whiz poppy bang. As certain as eggs is eggs, is a couple of kegs, is a frog scuttle makes you feel grand. The chuckling and gurgling, it seems so absurdly why people don't whiz pop all over the land.
So, I guess, Patricia, which one do you want to... I guess we should probably look at the story, maybe, and maybe look at how the stories are told. So, in the Cosgrove Hall version, the BFG is told as pretty plainly as possible. Maybe a bit too plainly, maybe, because I'll give people the background. So, Sophie, we start off with Sophie in this, and obviously with the setup that goes into that, and then obviously she sees the shadowy figure in the street, and from above in a window in her orphanage, and so that happens, and then the BFG is shown below. That actually is the BFG in the shot, and it shows him blowing his dreams into someone's bedroom. And so she sees that and is amazed at what she's seen, but then the BFG catches her in the corner of his eye, and so then sweeps her away and takes her to Giant Country. And because he's worried that Sophie's going to go around and tell everybody what she's just seen. And so that then leads to a lot of dialogue, actually, from David Jason, and I completely forget the name of the girl who plays Sophie in this, and I think that's...
is it Amanda Root?
Amanda Root, yes. And so Amanda and David Jason, who play Sophie and the BFG respectively, have this good back and forth dialogue, which I think is what I really like about the BFG over, I guess, the other BFG, because I think the BFG, I think, is more story and far more dialogue orientated than I think the other one is. I think the other one relies far more on its kind of like its graphical capability, rather than the fact that it looks the part, really, rather than actually talks the part.
Yeah, so in the 2016 film adaptation, it does kind of start similar, where we have Sophie in the orphanage, and she is walking around in the middle of the night, sorting out the mail, and she sees a whole bunch of guys just splashing around at a puddle in the streets, and she tells them to go away and be quiet. And then she sees the shadowy figure just wandering around, and then she hides under her bed, and then we have the giant grabbing her and taking her over to his location, and then Sophie's like really frightened of him, saying take me back home, even though that she hated the orphanage, and he was saying, no, I'm going to keep you here for the rest of your days and my days, because you saw me and I don't want anybody to know that I exist, and you're going to tell everybody in the newspapers and on the radio and on films, and I'm going to be trapped in a zoo with the giraffes and the hippopotamuses. And very similar to the BFG in the animated version, he does have a quirky way of talking. However, unlike in the animated film, the live action film, she constantly corrects him, saying like, "You're saying this incorrectly. This is the way it's pronounced," and it's never stated like that in the original animated film. She just accepts it for what it is.
Yeah. So, one thing I noticed, I don't think either in the films, I don't think we actually acknowledge the death of Sophie's parents. I don't think.
I mean, she briefly does talk about it in both of them, saying like, "Oh, my parents died when I was a baby, and then I was in the orphanage."
But they didn't necessarily say the cause of death. They didn't say it was like a car accident or anything like that.
No, they never said that. Yeah.
Freddie Krueger.
I'm actually curious about why. Why they never said that?
I don't know actually. I'd really like to know about why this was why because I imagine let's say for example, like this goes to sequel. Like I'm just saying that just as a thing. At least it would give you like some kind of plot point, maybe to obviously go forth into the second movie maybe. And I think 2016 I thought would probably be a bit more guilty of doing that than I would say the 1989 version would be. Because, I imagine that, there's going to be a lot of executives who are probably going to want to say, oh, yeah, if this becomes successful, we want to make sure that we're ready for the sequel. So, obviously stick as much stuff in there as possible. But no, we don't get anything that seems to acknowledge Sophie's parents' death. It seems to be the book. So, that's...
Yeah, exactly. So it continues off both versions actually continue off very similarly, where we have one of the giants, I believe it was the blood bottler, who comes by and he constantly talks to the giant, saying that he hears speaking and he's wondering who he's talking to, and then the giant says, "No, I'm talking to myself." And then he offers the blood bottler the snozcumber. Yeah, the snozcumber, and he's almost about to. And it's played differently in both versions. So in the animated version, the giant actually eats the snozcumber, and the BFG sees that Sophie was in it, and he's like afraid that she was eaten. And then we see her in a puddle of the snozcumber juice in the floor, where she's like completely covered in it. Mm-hmm. And in the live action movie, he tries the BFG tries his very best for the blood bottler to not eat it, and so he decides to throw it on the floor, and he almost steps on it, and he's like, no, you hate vegetables, you hate fruits, you hate water. And then he just walks away. So yeah, we never get that suspense of, oh man, was Sophie eaten? So it does play off a little bit differently.
Yeah, and the point, I guess I would say that the 1989 did that seem better than the 2016 version, because the 1989 had a lot of had that suspense in it, and so it was because it's something that is a threat that's actually that's introduced right in the get go of the story. And then obviously we get that, portrayed in this way. And I just feel like the 1989 movie did that a lot better than the 2016. Or the 2016 version didn't even do it at all.
No, it didn't. And also in the 1989 version, the BFG describes about how various humans taste depending on where they live, like about how the Turkish taste like turkey, and Panama, they taste like hats, and Greece, they taste really greasy. And so there's never like this depiction of human tastes in the 2016 version. Also, in the 2016 version, Sophie never tries the snozcumber. In the animated version, she does try it, and the description of it was like, it tastes like frog skin and rotten fish. And even though you do see the depiction of the snozcumber in the live action version, it really does look gross. I guess they decided to make it look gross as opposed to it tasting gross, because in the animated version, it does kind of look strange, but it doesn't look like really disgusting.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to remember, what did the snozcumber actually look like in the 2016 version?
Yeah, it definitely kind of looks like a spotted, kind of like squash, and when you slice into it, it kind of is really slimy with all of these like strands coming out.
Oh, I
So
remember now. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Actually, I will give credit for at least both movies for making the Snozzcumber look like really sickening things to eat, and so it's like but I don't know, like in regards to, I mean, I think we'll probably get into how it all looks, I think in later on, but I mean, in regards to like how the Snozzcumber is, I think in regards to the story, I think maybe the 1989 does a far better way of describing what this thing is rather than the 2016 version of this does.
Yeah, it does describe it better, and the live action version, you see how disgusting it looks. It's like not very appetizing that you wouldn't want to eat it. Then we'll have to talk about.
We'll get into the visuals like later on, but continuing on with the story.
Yeah, so then we get introduced to another drink. We have the Frog Scuttle or the Fizzy Pop. So both versions have a weird way of depicting the whiz popping. So we have a song. We have an animated song with the whiz popping in the '89 version, where it definitely kind of reminds me of the fizzy drinks in the Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory, where Grandpa Joe and Charlie are flying up in the air and they're like happy and stuff like that. And and it does play off into that nice little song about the description of flying and how good it makes you feel. Well, in the 2016 version, I don't think we ever see Sophie actually drinking from it, but the BFG does, and he farts out like this green cloud, which looks weird.
Mm-hmm. I just think, I mean, obviously 2016, I think you probably could get away with far more stuff than you could do in 1989. I think, because I think there's a different way. I think there's different leeways. I think in regards to the kids animation, because keep in mind, BFG 1989 was, this predated the 90s, where gross out humor, Ren and Stimpy and various other things. This was all prior to all this. So I think maybe you could say that maybe BFG was breaking some ground by obviously portraying whiz popping in this way. Maybe maybe an argument can be made there, but in 2016, I think these types of jokes were Scooby Doo was even doing this kind of stuff. Live action ones was even doing this kind of gross out humor anyway. So I mean, this was obviously par for the course. I think probably for the whiz popping in regards to BFG 2016. So and
there's one plot point that was in the 2016 version, but not in the '89 version. So Sophie was kind of okay with being taken by the BFG at first, and just like seeing the dangers of the giants when the blood bottler almost ate her. And then we have the 2016 version, in which the BFG actually inserted a nightmare into Sophie of her being eaten by the flesh lump eater, which is the leader of the giants. And then she's like, okay, I'm not going to run away because this giant's going to eat me. Even though in the '89 version, she was told that there were giants out there that would eat her and that he's the friendliest giant out of all of them. So I guess it kind of like puts a little bit more into the message of, don't go out there because, the other giants will eat the humans and he's the only one who will not.
Yeah, I just think, mind you, I think in regards to, obviously we'll get into characters in a minute, but obviously they do, the way that Sophie enters giant country is obviously portrayed very differently in each one of them. I guess in regards to the first act, I guess it comes to a point where, which one do we prefer at this point? Because I'm kind of on board with the 1989 version because it's a story that's being told and all being laid out by David Jason and everybody else, and I just think that it does a far better job, I think, in doing that than the BFG 2016 version does.
Yeah. And so let's talk about the giant. So we have that one scene in which in the 2016 version where he goes out over to a different location and he's carrying Sophie with him, and they decide that they were gonna push him around, and they actually like throw him around like a football, I think. Well, in the 1989 version, while he's going out to the location where the dreams are, he was like,
well, in the 1989 version, Flesh on Beach basically just grabs him and accuses him that he's going to be leaving before it's dark, and he has to basically do a cover story saying just, "Oh, I'm just walking around," and everyone just
exactly,
laughs.
yeah. So it's done much differently.
Yeah, and so I think they're far more subtle. I think with that than they are with the. I mean, obviously they just kind of show him as being kind of like bullied, really. Just and they don't really. Here's the thing about this. I think the Giants, I don't think, care overly too much about the BFG. I think they only really care about him when they have something that they think he wants. Like, for example, like when Blood Butler picked up on the fact that he was talking to somebody in there, and he thought it was a quote unquote human being. And that's the only reason why he would obviously go find the BFG, because he thinks he's going to get something out of it. And also, I mean, you've got Flesh Peter, who's a bit, I mean, I would say maybe a bit insecure, maybe about making sure he keeps control of all the Giants, because he's obviously the leader of the bunch. And so obviously he goes to make sure why the BFG is going where he's going. So obviously say, oh hey, I'm the leader of the pack. And maybe so he's kind of got a story element there to kind of like be the reason why he's grabbing hold of him and saying, hey, you shouldn't be going out here, it's not dark yet, get with the crowd, and but in the 2016 version they're basically just kind of high school bullies, if anything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I was just about to say that.
I was about that as well. Like, I don't think the voices are that great. I don't think for the 2016 version compared to the 1989 version. And as far as I'm aware, I think only one voice actor played the entire load of Giants. I think. Yeah. So it was Don Henderson who played him. So yeah.
I know they were motion captured by different people, but yeah, it does kind of sound very similar.
Yeah. And so for me, like, again, I think the fact that, you didn't need to, I think BFG 2016, I think kind of wasted a bit of time with this, really. I mean, all they did was just kind of like do like movement porn with it, really, if anything. Like just say, hey, we're going to throw him around,
we do get to see the other Giants, and there is a bit of a description of what the other Giants are compared to the 1989 version, but they don't really do anything other than the two that were actually featured in the movie. I mean, we already know about the Flesh Lump Eater, who's the leader. We already know about the Bud Bottler, which was shown earlier in the film, and then there's the Manhugger. So I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, everybody else, there's like brief descriptions about them.
Yeah, I mean, I will give credit to 2016 to like trying to bring the other Giants into the story, because in the 1989 version, the only thing you really see is the Blood Bottler or the Fresh Lump Eater, and then all the rest of them just get captured.
Yeah, exactly.
So like that's basically the whole story arc of our Giants here, even though they're supposed to be kind of like our main antagonists.
Yeah, exactly. They're supposed to be like a dozen Giants, and I guess the 2016 version was like, we need to flesh them out just a little bit so that the world of the Giants could be expanded on.
Yeah,
and
I mean, I guess you can kind of like give some leeway, I guess, to BFG 1989. I mean, like you couldn't have them like just going out and like you could just see them eating people, Like, I think we won't be talking about, the BFG having a U rating at this point. I think we can agree with that. I think we'll be probably comparing this movie to, like, I don't know, Friday the 13th or Freddy Krueger or something like that, Like, but, I mean, so obviously they had to play it safe with that, and they couldn't really show too much, violence, I don't think, with the Giants. I think in this, so I mean, in 2016 they made him kind of like, maliciously playful, and I think in the 1989 version they kind of played them safe. So
sure.
Yeah. So I guess the only way we're gonna get a really full fleshed out version of Flesh Lump Eater and all the other Giants is probably back in the book. So
yeah, that's true. All right, so I guess I want to do a comparison between the dream catching room. So I think that in the 89 version, it made it look like they're like sparkling diamonds, and when the BFG actually captures them, it's like shooting stars in a net. While in the 2016 version, they're all in jars, and he just gets them and he puts them away, and that's pretty much it. It definitely looks like it's a bit of a small laboratory in a cave.
Yeah, and so, I mean, for me, like, when I saw remember in the trailer when you saw the tree And it was kind of like, oh wow, he's gonna pick him up like in the tree, and then all of a sudden it wasn't that. It was kind of like, it was that was a little bit disappointing, really, because they gave us really strong. I mean, obviously we'll get to the visuals later on, but I just feel like in regards to the story, actually, I'll tell you, in the story aspects of it as well. I mean, you have a moment where Sophie kind of evolves as a character because she's trying to get over her fear of the new. And so then you see the musical moment where they sing the song "Sometime Secretly" in the 1989 version, and you see her kind of like flying into the air and just floating through all the dreams and everything, and so they go for like a musical moment and a slow down moment with Sophie in that. And I think the Dream Country scene, I think in 1989 kind of gave Sophie a bit more build up. I think compared to the one when she was in the 2016 version. I can't even remember what her build-up was in the dream scene.
I don't really remember that much either. Yeah. So I guess we can go.
But there's another thing as well. Do you remember when they caught the trouble humper?
At
the end, and so I remember. I mean, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but you could tell that the BFG was far more concerned about it than he was in the 2016 version. And then on top of that as well, he had even like a specialist canister for it to be held in. It could not be contained in glass. It had to be basically like in reinforced steel to have that. And so it showed the more seriousness of the nightmares than it did of the than it did in the 2016 version, I think. So I think that was far better portrayed, in my opinion, than I think in the modern movie. So.
All right, so. I guess we can continue on. So, in the 2016 version, the giants kind of like start having a calculation that maybe there's a human there, because earlier in the film, Sophie lost her blanket that she was covering herself in, and we never get that in the 89 version. Like the giants have no clue that Sophie was there throughout the remaining of the movie. We only see the giants briefly when they go over to the human world and they start kidnapping the children and eating them and leaving their bones behind. And that's when Sophie comes up with the idea of they need to tell the queen that they need to take down the giants because that's the reason why the children are disappearing.
I feel like we've missed a step here because, do you remember in the 1989 version we actually got a scene where you can see the BFG actually working in his dream cave and mixing all the dreams together. I don't think he did that. I mean, obviously I know he did the nightmare thing for Sophie back in the first act, but I mean, did we see any more of that in the 2016 version?
He did go over to London to spread the good dreams to the sleeping children, just like he did in the original. But It's not really played as much in the 2016 version. Now, the reason why is because already immediately that was when Sophie lost her blanket, and then the BFG realizes that the giants know that the BFG is with Sophie. So that's when they decide to come up with the idea of going over to the orphanage and taking the children one by one so that their identities will never be revealed over to the human world. Mm-hmm. Well, in the 89 version, it's played off a little bit differently.
Yeah, and in the 89 version, I mean, obviously they're having fun with it, and I don't think they had it's not really a confrontation, but they obviously witness Fleshel and Peter, eating kids in the 1981, or at least he's trying to attempt to anyway, and then Sophie tries to put a stop to it, but then BFG runs away with her, and so we get that in the 1989 movie, but I think in the 2016 version, obviously they go in a far different way because obviously, as you said before, in that they discover the blanket and find out that there actually might be someone there. But the only time, I mean, and on top of that, 1989 version, they suspected that the BFG had a human in his house, but that was only at the beginning of the movie, and then they suspected no other after that.
Yeah.
And so obviously that was only with Blood Bottler and not with anyone else. So
right.
I guess you could say there was a moment when obviously Fleshel and Peter was sniffing around at the BFG and then didn't see anything after that, and I don't know what that. Mind you, there wasn't really much of an explanation for that because you can see that he was Sophie was in the BFG's pocket that time, and you would have thought those giants would have smelt her on him. You would have thought. I don't know if I would like to see it as an explanation, like BFG, like carries like I don't know, maybe he wears axe. I don't know, but I mean like it would have been nice to have like some kind of explanation for that. In a way, why?
Yeah. Like when the Giants figure out that the BFG may have had Sophie, they completely decimate his entire living quarters trying to find Sophie, and they didn't find her, but it still left the entire place a mess. And I think that we have the scene in which when Sophie finds a picture of Queen Victoria in his belongings, then she decides to come up with a plan saying like, hey, why don't we tell Queen Elizabeth II about this? And, it's like, oh, she, in the original 89 version, she had this plan from the get-go when she learned about the children's disappearance. So then we have the scene kind of like play similar in which when, the BFG puts over the nightmare to Queen Elizabeth II over at Buckingham Palace, and then she gets the message about like giants are the ones responsible for kidnapping the children. There's a friendly giant, and there's a little girl right by where the window is, and so very similar to the 1989 version and the 2016 version, and maybe the book. Queen Elizabeth II is actually very mellow about it. She's just taking it like, oh yes, I believe you, and yes, we should definitely do something about it.
Well,
so
actually, I do apologize. Actually, she is Queen Elizabeth II. I was about to say, I don't think in the original BFG she was actually supposed to be the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. I think she basically was supposed to be kind of like, a Queen of England, if you will, and maybe to make it. That's what they did in the book. But I just realized actually, in 1989 version, she is actually billed as Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah, she looks exactly like her.
Yeah,
except that in the 89 version, she's looks a little bit younger, and then in the 2016 version, she's depicted as her older age.
Yeah, she would have been the Queen at the time. Pretty much. So I think the BFG. Actually, I'll tell you what. Actually, in the BFG 2016, is she actually casted? Is her name of her character actually Queen Elizabeth II? I'm just thinking about that. I'm just gonna check. I'm just gonna check that now, actually, because it's because it now I've only just noticed that out of the corner of my eye as we've been recording.
Yeah,
she is actually portrayed as well. Okay, then so she is. I was wondering about that. Can you do? I mean, obviously, I guess we can say well, Meryl Streep played the Iron Lady, so she played Margaret Thatcher. So I guess maybe you can play the Queen Elizabeth II without asking her permission. I guess.
I guess that's true. And, she's played by Penelope Wilton. I'm sure a lot of people may know her for Isabel Crawley in Downton Abbey or Harriet Jones in Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who don't know, the 1989 version is played by Angela Thorne.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I guess, we'll get into characters probably later on in the podcast, but, I guess, this is where I'm probably going to admit at this point, I think this is where the BFG 1989 kind of goes a bit downhill from here, because I've got to be honest with you, the third act is sort of not my most favorite part of the film. I've got to be honest with everybody, and the reason is because I feel like we get introduced to kind of like our idea of like my idea of the two I'm trying to remember what they're called, the witch doctors out of the Prince of Egypt.
Hotep and Hoy.
Yeah, Hotep and Hoy. Yeah, kind of like our version of Hotep and Hoy, and that's the head of the army and the head of the air force. And obviously they're played more to comedic value, and in the BFG book they're more kind of like bombastic and more kind of like characters that demand respect. In this, in the 1989 version, they're just kind of played as kind of like comic reliefs. So yeah,
and to be fair, the 2016 version, we have the farting dog scene, which was really weird.
Yeah, actually, this is one thing that kind of relates the two movies together. Don't you think it kind of goes a bit downhill at this point? Story-wise.
I'm sure probably the same thing happens in the book. It's like, we need to keep it to the spirit of the book. And, it doesn't really go any higher other than, we have the army coming on by and capturing the giants. And this part right here is probably my least favorite as well. It's kind of a little bit boring and just a little bit over the top with the two men, or it's kind of a little bit dull with the queen discussing about, yes, Sophie, I definitely do believe you about these giants and kidnapping the children. And then it just goes over the top with these farting dogs.
Yeah, it would have been kind of like I think probably maybe the Queen would probably like maybe have like an emergency meeting of like I don't know, maybe like the police or maybe like some kind of like group of people who would be kind of like oh, okay, so we're gonna put together like keep in mind these giants have been going around all over the world eating people. So, like, I mean, you probably think there would be, like, some kind of pattern that, would have been put together by now. So, it would have been better to kind of, like, flesh out, the whole, how horrendous this situation is. And, like, the Queen would probably sat there with Sophie and also, like, all these group of people and saying, like, all these, like, maybe, like, this wall board of, like, like, kind of like, in a police murder mystery. Like they're saying, oh, okay, in this position, this is exactly the same as what happened there, and what happened here, and what happened there. There's been bones found in windows, and there's been giant footprints and everything like that. So we can finally confirm that actually what the Queen and what Sophie and what the BFG are all saying is true. It's like
yes.
it's confirming it all. It's like the scene out of Terminator 2: Judgment Day. When Arnold Schwarzenegger is telling Miles Dyson about all the chaos he's about to create from obviously developing the chip that would then be used in the Terminators, obviously to take over the world and build Skynet and things like that. Like, it was they need a scene like that. I think both the 2016 and both the 1989 movies lack that. I think they just turn up. It's like, oh, this one incident. Okay, we'll take you at your word and we'll just go with it. I think it needed far more. It needed far more fleshing out. I think, but I can understand if it was cut out for time. If they ever did it at all.
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. So, why don't you talk about the 1989 version where the scene of the army men, where they were actually rotoscoped by an actual army from I believe it was which one was it? Which army was it?
It was
again?
I think it was the Special Forces in Oldham. I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, so the way they produced this was, I mean, and I'll tell you this as well, like, they aren't the first, animation companies to do this. I mean, if you remember, in the original Lord of the Rings series, obviously they rotoscoped a lot of stuff there too. And so, like, it was something that was done at that time period. And so they got, like, all these helicopters, and they also did all the army scenes as well. And so the idea of this scene would be that they would go out and capture the giants, and so there wouldn't be like any like there wouldn't be. So the idea is that they're going to be catching them alive, not catching, not obviously shooting them or anything like that. And that was actually kind of like what I was kind of getting out of the comic relief, if you will, because in this, like, they were far more kind of like, oh, hey, we're going to go to war, where we're going to mow these people down with machine guns, we're going to kill them all, and we're going to slaughter them and stuff like that. And like Queen says, no, you're not going to do no such thing, which he's kind of like, in today's world with how eager the U.S. Army is and how how things probably would have portrayed out. I think if this was actually portrayed in real life, I guarantee you nuclear weapons will probably be used. Maybe. I don't know, depending on how many people these giants have eaten all over the world, but who knows. But I mean, how realistic it would be that they would want to capture these people alive without killing them, I'm not too sure about that. But we go into this anyway, and so we go to the point, and I mean, also we'll get into the way it's all featured out later on, but so the army goes. We get these very tense scenes of them potentially trying to, because all the giants are asleep, and so they have to capture them while they're asleep, and so there's no way that they can. If they wake up, obviously it's going to be a bad day, and so for a lot of people. But and so that I actually do like that part of the third act where they're obviously doing the whole. They're basically trying to capture these guys, trying to strap them all together, and trying to get them so they can, airlift them back to, to obviously to prison and things like that. And so, those scenes were very tense to watch. And then when you saw that giant open his eye to what was going on and then start growling, like, you knew the game was up then. But so then all the intense scenes happen where, soldiers are getting, injured and things like that, and the commander's having to step in to try and help people out and stuff. And so they get the job done and they capture those giants. But I believe there's a difference between the way the 2016 version did it and the 1989 version did it.
Yes, there is. So the BFG decides that while the giants are sleeping, he's going to implant nightmares into them, which that way they can be able to capture them while they're asleep. So they put in nightmares about that. There was an earlier scene in which they were trying to catch Sophie, and then they have a nightmare regretting of what they did. And the only one who is not affected by it is the flesh lump eater. But still, the army was able to capture all the giants, and very similar to in the 89 version, they're put away into like this prison, and they're fed nothing but snozzcumbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, it doesn't get portrayed in the 1989 version, but in 1989 version, obviously they capture all the giants except for one, which obviously is the flesh lump eater, and so he runs wild and goes after tries to go after the BFG, and so the BFG confronts him, not wanting to be a coward anymore. And then, mind you, he does say a stupid line. I don't know why. I just feel like this line is not very good. When he's explaining of why he, led the human beings to the giants. And he goes, why? What for? And then BFG just kind of blurts out, because you is evil, and I see it now. And it's like, what? You didn't think, these giants killing all these people all this time wasn't evil? I just felt it was a bit of a daft line for David Jason to blurt out. But, obviously, it did what it did. And so obviously we get this really intense scene. Mind you, the one thing I'll say, I'll get back to that when we talk about the characters. But, so we get this whole intense scene of, like, Sophie coming out and trying to protect the BFG. And so Flesh and Bleaser goes after her. And so we get this whole chase after that. And that kind of delays for the BFG to go climb over the wall and go get all the nightmares all locked in these vials. And so he picks out one and blows it in Flesh and Bleaser's face, and it turns out to be the one about Jack and the Beanstalk. And that was kind of funny actually when they were talking about it on the way back, and saying, it's the one about Jack. And it's like, it's the one human being that all giants fear, and like, did they do that also in the 2016 version for that as well?
I don't know, actually. I don't know if they actually did that.
I don't actually tell us what the nightmares actually were about.
No, I think that the only thing that was, mentioned briefly was just that it was the nightmare that, Sophie had caught, and then she inserted into the giants.
Mm-hmm. So, we obviously get... So, mind you, now to this point, we actually get two far different endings.
Yes, we have two far different endings. Yeah.
So in the 1989 version, Sophie wins a room in the palace, pretty much, and is awarded a room in the palace to live with the royal family, and also her friends also from the Clonkers orphanage also get to stay there as well. So the BFG has to leave and obviously do. And then the one thing about this though is that I don't understand why they never really explained why he does what he does, like why he blows dreams into people's bedrooms and that. And I don't really understand. I mean, obviously if there was a far more fleshed out reason why he's doing it, I'm sure it's far more explained in the book than it is in either of the movies. But I just feel like it just felt a bit forced, really, that BFG had to just all of a sudden leave and never come back. And so he might come back sometimes. And then obviously we get the emotional moment that Sophie doesn't want to be away from the BFG, and then so the BFG asks, "Oh, do you want to come with me?" And so she says, "Yeah." And then they go off together, and that's the end. So
yeah. And in the 2016 version, we have the scene in which she does actually live in the Queen's palace, and the BFG returns back to his home. And he decides to grow a bunch of vegetables because, his trip to England inspired him to do that. So he doesn't have to worry too much about eating the snozzcumbers anymore. So she does constantly dream about the BFG all the time whenever that she feels lonely and she's laying there late at night, which actually is described in the 2016 version that the reason why she stayed up late all the time is because she has insomnia. I don't know if it's ever explained in the 89 version of why she stays up late. But she she yells out to the BFG, "Good morning," and then all the way far toward the giant country, he hears her, and then that's basically how the movie ends. In the book, the BFG gets a brand new giant castle, and there's a cottage that's right next to it where Sophie lives. So that is where they live happily ever after, and they get like tons of gifts from people from all over the world. And Sophie teaches the BFG how to read. And to go a little bit breaking the fourth wall, one of the books that the BFG learns from Sophie is written by Roald Dahl. So yeah, that's how it ends.
Interesting reference there. But, gee, I wonder what that could be for.
I don't know.
But, yeah, so that's the story. I mean, in regards to how they portray it, I mean, obviously we're going to say that the book is probably the best way of portraying it, duh. But, in regards to, like, the 1989 version and the 2016 version, which story would you prefer?
I prefer the 89 version.
I prefer the 89 version, too.
And here's the thing, I had never seen either of these versions. I wasn't even familiar with the 89 version, but then Aaron and I saw it together, and then I started understanding on why he liked it so much, because there's something about the 89 version that kind of reminds me of those animated fantasy films that I used to grow up with around the 70s and 80s. Like, it reminded me of The Hobbit. It reminded me of Flight of the Dragons. Something about it just gave me that familiar itch that kind of appealed to me. And I really did like the relationship between the BFG and Sophie. I felt that the BFG was much better played in the 89 version than the 2016 version. In the 2016 version, I felt like he wasn't as lovable compared to in the 89 version. And I understand that they were trying to play it a little bit more realistically, that, very similar to the 89 version, Sophie was afraid of the BFG because, he was a giant and she was afraid that he would eat him. And it's a little bit more apparent that the BFG wanted her to stay because, she would be eaten by the other giants, and that he's going to protect her and keep her safe. And in the 89 version, we do see that where, he's protecting her. He's showing her where the dreams are being held. They have that little fizzy drink scene, and it's very lovable and playful and happy. And the 2016 version just kind of removes some of it, and it just kind of feels a little bit hollow. So I do think that there are some things in the 2016 version that I understand that they were trying to do more, like introducing more of the giants, trying to expand the world a little bit. But there are some things that are a bit questionable, like the fact that we have the fizzy drinks, and we see the green fart popping up, and some of the character portrayals, it could have been fleshed out a little bit better. But other than that, I think that the 89 version or the book are the best places that you can check out to understand about the BFG.
Okay. The characters and the voice actors. Obviously, they're not really voice actors. They actually are kind of Sophie's actually a real character in this. And she is portrayed by, her name escapes me, Ruby Barnhill.
Yeah.
And also we get the Sophie who's portrayed by Amanda Root in Sophie. So I guess let's start with the main character. Who would you prefer in regards to the BFG? Do you prefer David Jason or do you prefer Mark Rylance?
David Jason, hands down.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because this wasn't David Jason's MO. He was either doing really raunchy comedies, or he was actually doing serious dramas like such a Frost.
Not to mention that he was the voice of Danger Mouse and Count Duckula.
Oh yeah, he was. Yeah, so that was that was his thing, and it was really cool to see him portray the BFG, and he did an incredible job with it as well. So.
Yeah, I think that the way that he speaks in the 89 version was definitely akin to what I would imagine that the BFG in the book would speak, because of his quirky way of talking, which apparently was heavily influenced by his Roald Dahl's wife, where she was suffering from a slight stroke, and she kind of had a weird way of talking. So she decided to kind of incorporate that talking into the BFG. It was actually inspired by a lot of people. The book is dedicated to his daughter, who passed away from encephalitis. And the character of Sophie was inspired by his granddaughter, Sophie, who apparently looked like that. It was described that she did have the bob haircut and the John Lennon glasses. So yeah, you can definitely see like the little bit of influences of the characters. And also, with this being one of his earlier books, because he was also really well known for his short stories, and he had a bunch of TV shows that he would kind of present, very similar to Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where it was kind of like an anthology series where it had a lot of drama, and it was a lot of thrills and suspense. And I guess early in his career, he was like adapting a lot of James Bond books into movies, and also there was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as well. So the late 70s and early 80s were kind of like where he was leaning more towards a child direction, because he wanted to write books that were fun and whimsical as opposed to being like really dark and dreary. But he did add a few dark and dreary moments into it to kind of give it a bit of an edge. And there are two adaptations that he absolutely loved. This one right here, the 89 version, it's the only one in his time that he like had a standing ovation and applauded.
Yeah.
Like he loved this version. And yeah, we'll talk later on in the retrospective about adaptations based off of his books that he despised.
Mm-hmm. And it was like, that's the one thing that this movie has going for. Like, it has the approval of the original creator. And it's like, and it's, I guess, after what happened with Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, I think you could definitely tell this was a bit of a redemption for him, I guess you could say. So
yeah.
So I guess also looking at the rest of the casting for this. I mean, obviously, Queen Elizabeth. I mean, she's kind of portrayed in two different eras, so it's kind of hard to compare both of them, because obviously they have different kind of like ways of going about it. But I mean, if I had to pick one, I would have to pick the 89 version again, probably.
Yeah, same
because
here.
she looks far more queenly than I would say the other queen does. I think in 2016, I think even Queen Elizabeth herself, I think probably would prefer the 89 version compared to what the 2016 version gave us, really.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the thing about this as well. Like, I mean, obviously we've been pouring a lot of praise on the cast of the 1989 version. Here's the thing about this: the BFG 2016 had over 25 actors working on this movie. This one only had about less than 12.
Yeah. So you have Sophie, the BFG, two of the Giants, Miss Crocker, Miss Cronker, who only appears like with a line in the 89 version, but you only see like a shadowy figure of her in the 2016 version. She never speaks. And as for the orphans, I mean, we do see the orphans sleeping when Miss Cronker's checking on them in the 2016 version. We don't see the orphans as much in the 89 version. And let's see, you also have the four guys splashing around in the puddle, as mentioned earlier. Then you have the Giants, which all of them are motion captured. Only two of them speak, the Bud Bottler and the Fleshman Eater. And then there's, Queen Elizabeth, there's her maid, there's the soldiers. So, yeah, you have a lot more actors in the 2016 version.
Yeah, and by the way, the person who played Miss Clonkers in the 1989 version was my friend Tylog, who is a Welsh actress and teacher. And sadly, though, she passed away 6 years later at the age of 50.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, so that would be her last performance, pretty much, in a movie. So, obviously we're going through the casting characters and everything, and I guess the next thing I want to go talk about probably like maybe the animation and maybe the CGI in 2016, and just comparing one. I mean, I know it's kind of hard to kind of compare one to the other because obviously it's two very contrasting styles, but I feel like the BFG just feels like, I mean, I don't know why, I just feel like it feels better being portrayed as an animation or as a CGI kind of like film rather than having live action actors in it. I don't know why. I just feel like it's a way better. I just feel like Roald Dahl, I think, is probably best portrayed in animation than it is portrayed in live action.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic too because there've only been like three or four animated adaptations, while most of them have been live action.
Yeah.
There's the BFG, there's James and the Giant Peach, there's Fantastic Mr. Fox, and there's Tom and Jerry and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
I actually take that back because I'm aware. I think there is actually a live action version of SEO Trot.
Yes, there is. There is a live action version of SEO Trot, but not an animated version.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I guess in regards to the BFG, I just feel like it would be better doing in animation than it will be done in that, because I remember one time, actually, I do have actually seen BFG in another form, and that is in a theatrical, not in a theatrical production, actually an on-stage production. And
Ooh.
so, yeah. So, the way they did it was that, now, you could have always imagined, how on earth do you put a 6 foot, not a 6 foot, sorry, but how on earth do you put like a
24 foot.
A 24 foot giant on a stage, like, for, a Christmas, production. It wasn't like a pantomime or anything like that. The audience barely had any interaction in it. But, so they did it where, they had to tell the story from Sophie's perspective. They obviously, all the characters were kind of like, normal sized. Like everyone was like, all the time. But when they had to tell the story from the BFG's perspective, they then got the actors and actresses to get out like these little not little hand puppets, but kind of like these little like little puppets to like where they control with like sticks. And I can't remember what they're actually called, but
marionettes.
Marionettes, yeah. So they got them portrayed as marionettes, from an above perspective. So Sophie would like be on the table, and so the actress would actually be playing kind of like an Avenue Q. Like where you have like the Muppet actually being portrayed on the stage by the actor, kind of actress, kind of like that. So and so they've actually done. That's how they've portrayed the BFG on the theater stage. Pretty much. So, but, I mean, watching that and watching, and don't get me wrong, it was really imaginative and it was really good and they really went hard work, but you can it kind of takes you a bit out of the moment from times, because you can kind of see, there's, the uncanny valley kind of, starts to kick in after a while after watching it. And so, so, for me, it was, I've always just felt like the BFG makes far better sense if it's been told from a 2D or a 3D animation point of view. That's just my thoughts on it. But,
yeah, so I guess, with it being Cosgrove Hall, you're not going to expect, Disney or Don Bluth levels of quality animation.
They had to go. I mean, one thing I think, keep in mind, cause I feel like Cosgrove Hall, it was very out of their way to actually kind of go and do a feature-length film. I feel like they were doing it to see if it would fly. I think, because, keep in mind, this was at the time when, before the Disney Renaissance era, we all thought Disney was on its deathbeth. At one point, we all just thought it was like, it's going to rely on its archive footage and its theme park out in Florida. That's the only way it's going to be. But then the Renaissance era came in and came in and saved the day, and then Pixar came in after that, and obviously, so I think Cosgrove Hall, I think, this is just my opinion, I don't know this for a fact, but I think Cosgrove Hall and a lot of animation companies, I think, started to try and come in to see if they could actually, eat that slice of the Disney pie that was left kind of void, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much every animation studio tried to do that. I mean, there are so many Disney knockoffs that came out around the 90s that tried to get a slice of that Disney pie, but they failed miserably. Like, there was Princess and the Goblin, Happily Ever After, Swan Princess. So, yeah, there were so many companies that try to be akin to a Disney film, but they all failed.
I think the one that kind of went unscathed, I guess, was Anastasia.
Yeah, but that's because it came out during the late 90s, and it was done by Don Bluth. So he had an idea about what Disney was, doing at the time. And these movies, they came out in the early 90s.
Yeah, as we know, I think, would I say that Don Bluth's, star was definitely... No, I'm here. Hello?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm here.
Okay.
Let's try this again. Go ahead. Anyway, so Anastasia came out in the late 90s. So it was at that point in which when Don Bluth kind of had an understanding about okay, this is what the kids are into. They like the princesses, they like the music, they like the happily ever afters. And he was able to do it, far better than something akin to Quest for Camelot or Swan Princess or anything like that, in which you can definitely tell that they were trying to emulate Disney, but not understanding of what made Disney so good. Don Bluth actually worked at Disney, and he kind of had an understanding of what made Disney films work. And I actually do like Anastasia. I think it's the best one out of the Fox Animation Studios trilogy. I know a lot of people like Titan AE, but I still find many problems with Titan AE that I just can't really like it as much as Anastasia.
Yeah, like I can't remember all that much of Titan AE. I found some of it kind of boring, really, to be quite honest with you. Like it picked up in the final act, but the rest of it I couldn't tell you what happened.
Yeah, it is pretty forgettable, and it tried to put in the late 90s, early 2000s rock, like it's time to fly and can you take me higher. It's like you're putting this in like a sci-fi movie where it's about these humans who are the last on Earth, and they're trying to get the Titan so that they can be able to resurrect human life again after the Dredge destroyed them all. So
it kind of made you feel like someone who couldn't make it in anime in Japan decided to come over to America and try to make it there instead.
And Don Bluth has mentioned in interviews about like this wasn't his like particular style, and the it was like being pushed around, and there was a lot of behind the scenes issues, and many people were being fired, and the final product was a mess, and it was the last film that Don Bluth would even be a part of until he did the Kickstarter with Gary Goldman trying to do the Dragon Slayer movie, and we haven't really heard too much about it since. So I'm actually curious.
It kind of makes me wonder about. I mean, obviously we'll get that into another time, I think. But I mean, we obviously were running away from the BFG, but I mean,
anyway, so I'm trying to bring up a point that with the BFG, I know that Cosgrove Hall are not in the same league as like Disney when it comes to like their animation, but they did do an admirable job of trying to bring this world to life with the giants and the human world and the Buckingham Palace, and the animation is done pretty well, and I think that it's some of the best that they've done. Something like Danger Mouse and Count Duckula and all the other ones that they've done, and I think that this was their only theatrical movie, if I'm mistaken. Right, Eric?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is. And so, I mean, the Cosgrove Hall, I mean, keep in mind, like, the Cosgrove Hall was more kind of like, your Saturday morning cartoon kind of like, deal. I think, like, that, I mean, it was quite an amazing feat, really, that they actually pulled this off. They pulled £3 million into this. That's like, I mean, I'm trying to think what that would be in inflation terms today.
Yeah.
3 million, what that would be, £3 million in 2019. That's 1980. Sorry, guys, I'm just doing some number crunching because it would give you a bit more of an insight in basically how big of a deal this actually was. So in today's money, if I'm putting in enough zeros, today it probably will be around about $6 million. So
that's double.
That's double. It was today. So 6 million to 6.2 million dollars basically.
Okay.
So it was a big deal for a small company like that to actually pull that off, and obviously it didn't have like Toy Story, kind of like proportions or anything like that, but I mean it was an admirable thing from a small company to do that. So it made its name out of Danger Mouse and Count Duckula.
Yeah, pretty much, exactly.
Yeah. So, but I mean, obviously, I don't mean to switch gears a little bit, but I mean, obviously, going from that, and let's go to the music, shall we? So, as far as I'm aware, I mean, I can't really remember the music from the BFG 2016.
Yeah, not really. I mean, I do know that they have some nice background music. They try to complement the scenes, but nothing that really sticks out. And there wasn't any musical numbers either.
Mm-hmm. And so, but in the other one, I remember Sometimes Secretly, and I remember, Whiz Pop, Whiz Bang, and obviously you remember the orchestral, beginning of the army going into battle, pretty much. The soundtrack was brilliant, where Keith Hopwood and Malcolm Rao did an incredible job with the score. And by the way, it's currently under license with Pluto Music, and they released it on Spotify. So
nice.
You can actually listen to it on Spotify on the soundtrack, so that's pretty good. And it actually contains, and also for those of you who do not know, Sometimes Secretly, that music is done by Sharon Campbell, and she's actually quite well known for doing other theatrical music pieces as well on stage. So so I just wanted to go check her out. But again, I mean, the 1989 music I think is probably a lot better than the 2016 one as well. Which I mean, right now I think 2016 is just kind of like generic, orchestral music, if anything.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right then. So final words about the BFG. The 89 version is very whimsical, very charming, and has great characters with Sophie and the BFG. Also has a bit of tense moments with the giants, and also has really nice music. And the 2016 version, I mean, yes, I kind of admit that some of the CGI looks really nice, and also that they try to give some more depth into the other giants and some of the world building, but it kind of comes across as a little bit typical and kind of hollow. I mean, not to say that, everything about it was bad. It's just that it's simply okay. And you would expect something a lot bigger and better from Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, and just I think the fact that Cosgrove Hall, the little engine that could, right now, at least in our opinion, kind of best, best Hollywood. Like, it's. I mean, it would be interesting to see today what would happen if, let's say, Cosgrove Hall went for it again and decided to put in. I mean, obviously there was postponed part of the movie, which obviously was a miserable failure. I think Jamboree will definitely tell you about that. But I mean, in regards to it would be interesting to see. Like, I mean, obviously we got Don Bluth coming back with this Kickstarter as well. It would be interesting to see like any other smaller production companies would decide to, oh hey, let's pour a couple of million into this and let's see what we can do.
Well, don't forget that there was the announcement last year that Netflix is going to be doing remade adaptations of the Roald Dahl books. So we're going to be seeing Matilda, Willy Wonka, the Chocolate Factory, the Twits, I think was also announced as well, which has never gotten an adaptation.
Well, so I mean, also, I tell you what, for the Roald Dahl Retrospective, we could definitely talk about that. I mean,
we'll talk about it when it's released, but right now there's no release date. I haven't seen any posters or trailers or pictures or anything like that. Yeah. So it's still
I will make this quick comment, knowing that now that exists, and that is this, and that is I mean, this is going to be the third Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie, I think, or the fourth one if you count the Tom and Jerry.
Yes,
if you count the Tom and Jerry atrocity. But there's also the one movie I don't think we've ever seen. I don't think is the Twits.
Yeah, and we've never seen the Twits adapted anywhere.
No.
We've seen Matilda adapted. They're doing a remake of The Witches, which is going to be coming out next October, which is why we're actually doing the retrospective in the first place, to kind of like, do all the movies that were adapted from his books in honor of the upcoming 2020 Witches remake. But yeah, the only one that has yet to be adapted that will be, adapted into Netflix is the Twits. So it should be really interesting to see about, how that's going to be coming along. And also another one that's going to be adapted that has never been adapted before. I'm looking at the list right now. George's Marvelous Medicine and Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, which they were supposed to do
Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. I mean, I really thought that was going to be... I was looking at the Johnny Depp version. I was thinking, yeah, that's where the next sequel's going to be. I think that sequel was going to be with Johnny Depp, but obviously that's not happened. So.
And they also planned on doing it with Gene Wilder as well, but that never happened either.
Yeah, so well, mind you, after the disapproval of Roald Dahl, I think after the fallout with that, I don't think Great Glass Elevator, I don't think was going to happen.
Yeah, but now they're finally doing it on Netflix.
Yeah, so so let's see how that all plays out, and let's see what Netflix has got to offer us. But
all right, so yeah, I think that should be it for this first episode of the Roald Dahl Retrospective. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening, and we're going to be doing this once a month, where we're going to be looking back on the adaptations of his books. Now, we're not going to be doing any of the screenplays that he's written, like Chitty Chitty Bang Bang or any of the James Bond movies. So we're just only going to focus on his books and his shorts. And the first one we're going to be talking about for next time is the very first adaptation, which is called 36 Hours. That is a 1965 suspense film that was based off of his short story, Beware of the Dog.
Cool. Well, until then, I'll see everybody later.
All right. Take care.
Goodbye.